Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world.
I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. Lot in this world you should know, and love in life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then love in life will guide you. I know that life outside is so hard.
Goeienaand, good evening fellow South Africans and citizens of the world, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Now, before we get into tonight's live stream, I just want to draw your attention to the fact that there is a new featured video which outlines the key role that Dr. Michael Cassidy played in the lead up to the 1994 elections, and you will find that on the homepage of Loving Life TV, near the top left. Now, Michael will be our guest on Wednesday the 17th of May. Now, he is a truly phenomenal person who rarely, if ever, goes in front of the camera. And it's because of our history that he's coming on. And it's going to be an amazing evening, amazing discussion. Don't miss that live stream. That's Wednesday the 17th of May, next week at 8 p.m. Johannesburg time. Now, we have another very, very interesting live stream tonight. And I'm talking to Bart. And we're going to be talking about money laundering in South Africa, which is very topical when you consider what happened or what went down at Pala Pala. And that's one of the questions I'll be talking to Bart Henderson about. Now, just a bit of background to Bart. Bart frequently contracts to organizations, investigation companies, audit and law firms, bringing added capacity on your bigger and more complex fraud and corruption cases. Bart became a certified fraud examiner in July 1994. Since then, he has been invited to speak as an expert in his field by a number of academic and governing bodies for the professions, including the Institute of Chartered Secretaries of South Africa, Institute of Credit Management, South Africa, Institute of Chartered Accountants in Zimbabwe, and Institute of Internal Auditors, and Institute of Advanced Studies. Bart has been the main speaker at numerous white-collar crime summits and symposia, and has been an official research partner on the NEPAD African Peer Review Mechanism process. Between 1997 to date, Bart has trained financial crime investigators from over 16 countries and 3 continents. Now, money laundering is a really, really big crime area, and it's really the tip of the pyramid how do you've got all this illegal money? How do you try and hide it? Well, you launder it. And so let's have a look at a short video about money laundering in Southern Africa. Here we go.
We begin in South Africa, where Al Jazeera's investigative unit has uncovered a large-scale money laundering operation. The scheme implicates some of the country's biggest banks. A former member of the criminal syndicate has spoken exclusively to Al Jazeera. Alexander James has this report.
Daoud Khan is a former money launderer. He fears for his life and is speaking exclusively to Al Jazeera's investigative unit from a safe house. He says his role was to forge paperwork to disguise the money laundering as legitimate transactions.
In the office we had a strong room, and in the strong room we had boxes upon boxes of bank stamps. We had boxes of passports, we had boxes of ID documents.
Head of the operation is Daoud's brother, Mohammed Khan. His street name is Mo Dollars. His financial services firm served as a front for the laundering.
He's sort of held up as this sort of shadowy figure that controls money laundering in South Africa, that everybody wants to find, wants to locate, wants to discuss, wants to catch, wants to prosecute, or wants to use.
We've obtained a trove of thousands of documents that reveal fake invoices from fictitious suppliers addressed to Mo Dollars clients.
No goods, no services, purely just money laundering. And I can tell you that with 100% certainty because I done that logo.
We conceal the identity of one of Mo Dollars' former business partners.
Mohammed Khan is known for money laundering. His pickups will be $1 million in profit a day, transferring to different countries, to different places, and he got all the connections to do that.
To ensure the scheme's success, the launderers bribe employees at South Africa's banks.
You look after us, you push through all our payments, no questions asked, on the specific company, and we'll match your salary every month, in cash.
A ledger records kickbacks paid to staff at Sasfin Bank, who are responsible for processing foreign payments.
We were actually the executive management team of the Sasfin Forex processing department, if I can put it to you that way. Mohammed was CEO of that company, without them knowing.
The ledger records bribes paid to employees at other banks too.
Vivian Michael, he is a senior manager at the compliance division of Standard Bank South Africa, and also is the key communicator to the South African Reserve Bank. I can make a phone call for you now to individuals in Absa Bank that will put whatever you tell them to put on the letterhead for you, and they would stamp it.
Mohammed Khan told us that all the allegations against him were false and based on manufactured evidence. He denied bribing anyone in the South African banking sector. Vivian Naika denied involvement in a money laundering syndicate. Sasfin said it was taking vigorous action against former employees. Absa passed on our findings to its forensic investigative unit, and Standard Bank told us it takes a zero-tolerance approach to fraud and criminality. Alexander James, Al Jazeera.
Karim Singh is the Executive Director of Corruption Watch. He says the revelations are not entirely surprising.
It's important to know that South Africa has gone through a very difficult period in terms of what we characterized as state capture, whereby whether it be at the high echelons of the police service or within our prosecuting services, we saw the hollowing out of law enforcement institutions and institutions that promote accountability. So it's fair to say, across the board that South Africa's enforcement of things like money laundering and the fight against organized crime and corruption has been really challenged and weakened in this period. And it's recognized and acknowledged broadly that these are areas that we need to see massive improvement if we want to turn a corner around the grips that the economy finds itself when it comes to organized crime. That the announcement of the Financial Action Task Force to greylist South Africa was an announcement that came out last month. It's quite significant for the country. It basically says that South Africa cannot be vouched for as a safe investment destination, given the types of weaknesses that we're talking about in terms of the anti-money laundering framework. So this greylisting really puts the South African government on terms in terms of ensuring that significant progress is made, both in terms of legal reforms required, but then also in terms of implementing those and in terms of enforcement.
And you can watch the next instalment of our 4-part series, Gold Mafia, Smoke and Mirrors. The full episode is coming up on...
Okay, so there you go, guys. That's a little bit of background to money laundering, and I'm going to get our guest on now. Okay, let's get this show on the road. Here we go. Hi, Bart.
How are you, Scott?
Excellent, thank you. How are you, mate?
Great.
I love your backdrop, and it makes me homesick. I'm stuck in Brisbane, Australia, and I see that amazing Table Mountain behind you, and I just feel, wow, what a beautiful country South Africa is. What a shame about the government. But anyway, we're going to be talking about that tonight. So before we do, Bart, let's get right into this. We're talking about money laundering. How much money is laundered globally annually?
Scott, according to the FATF, they say that it's actually difficult to quantify because a lot of it doesn't go reported, which is interesting to me because every single one of us have got FICA and we've got RICA, and every time we go to the bank we've got to give our details again. But at any rate, anywhere between 2% and 5% of global GDP.
Wow.
Yep. Roughly translated, that amounts to anywhere between $800 billion US dollars and $2 trillion.
Wow.
US dollars annually. So yeah, that's a lot of money. That's what they can quantify.
But now look, this is money that's not been laundered by the average guy you meet in the street. This has obviously been laundered by political leaders or by crime gangs, but who are the main people who launder money?
Drug money, sanctions, countries that have been sanctioned, politically exposed people. That would be all government ministers and high-powered officials, that type of thing. So yeah, it's mainly proceeds of corruption, and of course crime. Right. Being your drugs and that arms dealing and the rest.
Yeah. Now, how much laundered money has been confiscated in a year globally?
Well, the stat, the best stat that I've got is again from the FATF, and their figures are for the period 2014 to 2018 globally. The number that they give that has been confiscated by member countries, there are 44 countries that are not member countries, the rest of the world is. So that amount is $5.2 billion total between 2014 and 2018. So what you've got is you're spending 2 to 5% of GDP, global GDP, on a mechanism which is anti-money laundering, the FATF and their recommendations, and they costing anywhere between 800 billion and 2 trillion per annum, and they've managed to basically confiscate from illicit transfers a total of 5.2 billion.
Wow!
In 4 or 5 years.
That's amazing. Well, look, I read that.
Well, that's not amazing. I think it's quite poor.
It's shocking, I should say.
It is shocking.
I read just yesterday that President Joe Biden and his son Hunter are being investigated for $10 million in laundered money. This is the President of the United States of America. And this comes from the Republicans in the House of Representatives. They're actually investigating the President of the United States for money laundering. So it goes all the way to the top. Now,
it does, yeah.
You mentioned that 44 countries do not belong to the FATF. Firstly, who is the FATF? And secondly, what sort of countries do not participate in this organization?
I'm going to answer the last question first. The type of countries that don't belong are your Venezuelas, your Irans, Sudan, Yemen, those type of places. Dubai is not a signatory, obviously, and that's a money laundering hub. But
I was about to say that Dubai always seems to come up when it comes to money laundering.
Dubai is I think in any event it's the global center for money laundering.
Wow.
But the FATF has a very interesting history. The United States government, their presidents, they've always got to have a war about something. In the early 80s, Ronald Reagan declared that the biggest threat to the American population, average citizen, was drugs. And of course, if you look at what's going on in America today, he wasn't far from wrong. But that was, I think, 1982, whatever it was. But in any case, in that period, you had a lot of illicit drugs coming in from the Medellin, Cali cartels, etc., etc. And Ronald Reagan declared the war on drugs. And with the war on drugs, he realized that the best way to hit these cartels was to go after the money, which made perfect sense. And the United States formed the Financial Action Task Force, which is what we know today as the FATF. So the FATF was originally formed by the United States to assist themselves in combating the laundering of proceeds of crime from drug money. The FATF was running along nicely. They realized that they obviously had to have interjurisdictional cooperation from other countries, and so they lobbied as hard as they could. For about 10 years, I think there were 4 members. The one member, the country that they were trying to bring in was Switzerland, and Switzerland withheld, didn't want to join because, they would join with the proviso that they got given the chairmanship of the FATF, which the United States didn't want to relinquish. So Switzerland hung out there for a while, but countries that joined was obviously the United Kingdom, Germany joined, I think France. There were 3, maybe 4 countries globally that belonged to the FATF for about a decade. Then what happened is September 11th, 2001, you had the World Trade Center. And you had George Bush Jr. standing there at the wreckage of the Trade Center, and he gave that famous speech, "You're not with us, you're against us." And overnight, FATF became no longer a financial action task, it became anti-money laundering and drug trafficking. It became anti-money laundering and terrorist financing. And with it morphing instantly into anti-money laundering and terrorist financing, and with "if you're not with us, you're against us," the FATF, those members that they were, all 3 or 4 of them, unilaterally decided to come up with a black book. And or blacklist. And those countries that didn't join the FATF would get blacklisted. Now we're talking about greylisting, but then you got blacklisted. And if you got blacklisted, you had a major problem in terms of getting money at favorable rates, even getting loans at all. So there was a massive scramble internationally for countries to join the FATF, and within about a year, they had over 100 signatory members. And that's basically the birth of the FATF. And the pillars of the FATF and their rules, they came out with these rules-based, they call them recommendations. The thing is, how can it be a recommendation if you say, if you don't implement these regulations and these rules, you'll get sanctioned? I mean, it's kind of a misnomer. But in any event, so the pillars of anti-money laundering is really customer due diligence, and KYC, know your customer, know who your customer is, and when the customer joins the bank, do your due diligence to make sure that they say they are who they say they are. And that's really the simple mechanism of what it is. But now it's obviously global, and costing the global economy anywhere between 2 and 5%. No, sorry. That is the 2 and 5% is how much money laundering there is. What it actually costs the global economy, you, me, your bank, governments, to actually implement it is anywhere between 0.5% and 0.2% of GDP.
Wow.
So it's an enormously costly exercise for very little fruit that it bears, I must tell you.
Yeah.
But there are explanations for it. They say, well, the benefit is that there's downstream benefits in respect of, well, it makes life more difficult for terrorists. And I used to lecture on the subject and for almost 20 years, and I just stopped. I stopped because I couldn't, because it just doesn't make sense to me. And I can't take people's money and stand there lecturing them when I don't believe what I'm saying in the first place. So it became a bit of a challenge. So yeah.
So FATF stands for Financial Action Task Force. Is that correct?
Task Force, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Now look, I want to just touch on something which isn't in the notes and the points that you gave me, and I think it's a huge elephant in the room. And there's this fellow who has shares in the South African Reserve Bank. I've forgotten his name. He sounds like a bit of a bit of a crazy, but he brought up this bank account which apparently is held by the South African Reserve Bank, called White Spiritual Boy. And he said that bank account had literally a balance of trillions of rands. And a lot of people thought, oh, this guy's a Fruit Loop, what bank account could have trillions of rands just sitting there and no one's doing anything with it? But then I saw a report, in fact I put this up on Loving Life just last week, where I think it was Al Jazeera did an investigation into money laundering, and they were talking about this White Spiritual Boy bank account, which apparently does exist and apparently is used for money laundering. And first, who would have who would own, or who would have ownership of a bank account that's got trillions of rands sitting in it, just sitting there in a bank account? I mean, how does this work?
Look, I can't speak for the Al Jazeera program. I haven't seen it, and I don't know what they've managed to. I have seen something, but recently, as a matter of fact, that did trigger me. But look, I actually looked into that claim and the people that were making the claim, and then we had a very senior leader here, Tokyo Siswale.
Yes, he's mentioned in that video.
Man, yeah. Look, I don't have all the facts that I compiled. I did actually look into it, and I did investigate the significant part of it. It's an absolute codswallop. But it's difficult for me to now sort of say to you, okay, this is what happened. It's happened such a long time ago. I've got dozens and dozens of investigations between now and then. You've caught me a little bit by surprise. But I do know that spiritual white boy, and specifically the people that were punting it here, were thoroughly debunked. I mean, you haven't heard a word from them since. Tokyo Siswale is still around. It's not like he's been taken out or anything like that. But yeah, it's people kind of figured Tokyo Seswali got taken for a big ride by those people. I mean, he was made to look like a bit of a fool.
Yeah.
But yeah, the spiritual white boy has been around. It's come up. It's gone around for ages. But I think I might have written something. I actually have written something about it on LinkedIn. Maybe we can actually pick this up on another program. I'll just go and delve into my notes and see what I found and remember exactly what it was all about. But I do know that it was debunked, seriously debunked. So I don't know what Al Jazeera is all about.
Yeah, I guess the disconnect I'm talking about here is you've got a world where there are literally probably 1 billion plus people who are starving. You've got a huge amount of food that is wasted every year that's just literally thrown into the trash can. And the disconnect to me is that you've got these bank accounts which have got up to trillions of rands, or let's say hundreds of billions of dollars just sitting in them, which could solve the entire starvation problem of the world. And you wonder what the heck that money is doing, because it's not doing anything productive or anything good for society. This is where I see there's a huge disconnect between those who've got this money and those who are basically, just dying of starvation.
Scott, I both of us, in Afrikaans we say ons is harde baarde, né? We've been around the block, eh?
Yeah.
And in the fraud investigation game, management game, I've been doing it for 30 years. I think I've got a pretty good read on people's nature. Spending years on training people on professional interviewing techniques, how to look for signs of deception, how to study a fraudster. What are their mannerisms? How do you spot these guys? And people say, no, you can't spot a fraudster. Yeah, you can. I think after doing this job for like 30 years, I kind of have a pretty good grasp of what a fraudster is all about. And they're all the same. They're really, really all the same. It's very rare that you're going to find a fraudster that's stolen $1 billion, sleeping on a straw mattress on the floor in a room somewhere, tucking his money away in the ceiling. It just doesn't happen. What's the point? So these trillions that are sitting there, somebody is going to want it. Somebody is going to spend it. Whether it's, it's just the most unlikely story. It's not one that I'd really want to delve into deeply, but it's just this thing of trillions sitting there in some account and nobody knows where it is, and then you think that there must be somebody who knows who it is, and that person is not pinching it, and where are they squirreling it away, that kind of money, where do you put it? And you leave it in the Reserve Bank. Well, maybe it's in the United States Reserve Bank. Our Reserve Bank, it would have been stolen long ago. Come on. Your postbox gets stolen in South Africa, man. So imagine that there's trillions sitting with especially with this regime. You're nuts. I mean, it's just not going to happen. So I really think I'll look into it, and we can always come back to it.
Yeah, let's do that.
Don't believe. Yeah, I really don't believe there's trillions sitting in the Reserve Bank. And if I had the slightest suspicion, even the slightest, that there was merit to that story, I promise you I'd be one of the first people in this country to be onto that.
Yeah.
Make no mistake about it.
Now,
and if it hasn't, yeah.
Let's move on. But you made a comment there that really just caught my attention. You said at the South African Reserve Bank, basically, if you've got a bank account with a huge amount of money in it, someone's going to steal it from within the South African Reserve Bank. Has that actually happened? Has someone had money stolen by people within the South African Reserve Bank?
Not that I know of. That I know of.
Okay.
No.
But that brings me back, because I while we're talking about South Africa, now you're an expert on money laundering. What do you have to say about
fraud mainly, but money laundering is part of it.
Yeah. What do you have to say about Ramaphosa and that money stuffed in his furniture at Pala Pala? Now, last year he nearly resigned as president just after this all came out, when that guy Fredericks, I think it was, who used to be high up in intelligence, who actually lodged the complaint with the police. But
Fraser.
Fraser. That's it, Fraser. But since then, Ramaphosa has kind of doubled down, and now he's been re-elected for another term as president by the ANC. Does this basically sum up how corrupt the ANC are, that they've got a man who... Firstly, is that money laundering what he had in his furniture?
I wish I could make definitive statements about that. The fact is, Scott, to say that the guy was laundering money, firstly, there are all these other little factors that kick in. Did he declare them? Was the money declared when it crossed the border, when it came into the country? Apparently it was, then it wasn't. Then SARS put out a statement that the president is tax compliant. So, and then when the statement came out, that he's tax compliant, my first thought was, okay, so he's tax compliant, great. Does that mean that he declared the money? So you have these broad statements. I can't say that he was laundering money. Because I haven't seen the declarations at SARS. This has to be investigated by the authorities. I would love to just go off and say, the guy's corrupt and he was laundering money. Is it unusual that he's sitting there with that amount of US dollars? Oh, absolutely. Should it have been declared when it came into the country? Absolutely. Did he declare it to SARS? Should he have declared it to SARS? Absolutely. If he hasn't, well, until he, if the money is still there, you can't say it's money laundering. But if he takes the money and he goes and he buys 10 luxury vehicles, now he's layering. So that becomes money laundering. I think people have to understand the mechanism of what money laundering really is, and which is why I'm reticent to say, it's money laundering or not, because there are all these other little things. What is it? Tax evasion? The person who brought it in, did they declare it? So when you take all of those little factors and you weave them all together, then ultimately it becomes money laundering. So it might have been in various stages of money laundering, but you can't say it's money laundering. And I think that's where he's at, and that's the game that's being played.
Well, look,
and then who's investigating him anyway? So,
look, I want to just put a conspiracy theory to you, and it's one that's been talked about on social media, and it is, and I need to make this very clear, it is a conspiracy theory, and that is that. Apparently, when the money was stolen out of his furniture at Pala Pala by those people who broke in,
yes.
Apparently the week before, Bill Gates had arrived in Cape Town to play tennis with top tennis players like Federer and stuff like that. There was some kind of exhibition tennis match they had. The week before, the theft happened at Pala Pala. And the suggestion being made now, this was during COVID. The suggestion being made now, and this has got legs, okay? And it's interesting because most conspiracy theories seem to be actually the truth. And there's a very interesting joke about that, where you got people saying, look, we're running out of conspiracy theories because they're all actually turning out to be true. Now, with this particular one, the conspiracy theory is that Bill Gates' main objective in coming to South Africa to, play this exhibition tennis match with Federer and a couple other guys was actually to hand over a bribe to Ramaphosa, and that was cash. That was $4 million, which is what landed up in his furniture at Pala Pala. And the timing is interesting, because this is how conspiracy theories go. You've got a super wealthy guy arriving in his private jet, comes into Cape Town, plays this exhibition tennis match with Federer, which is like a furphy. His main objective is to hand over all this cash to Ramaphosa. So, it opens up a can of worms, doesn't it, when you've got this sort of thing happening?
Again, Scott, I deal with facts. Obviously, I have hypothesis, and I hypothesize and that type of thing. And this is a conspiracy theory. Is it? I don't know. What is there any evidence to suggest that what was the bribe for?
Oh, look, for him to push the vax. I mean, it's Moderna and Pfizer made it was hundreds of billions of dollars out of the rollout of the COVID jab. Which,
yeah, but I mean, we spent hundreds of millions building a big factory here to make the jab.
Yeah, that didn't go too well.
No, it's closed down.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Look, I don't shoot down conspiracy theories at all. I mean, a lot of them have got merit, But when I'm presented with the conspiracy theory, I always think downstream, and I'm like, okay, fine. So Bill Gates gave Cyril $4 million for a bribe for vaccines. I'm like, but nobody's taking them. The uptake of vaccines in South Africa was shocking.
But that's because South Africa the government here is useless at everything it does. I mean, I'll tell you what is not a conspiracy theory, is that CIPRO, which is the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority, which actually allows what drugs can be dispensed in South Africa, CIPRO in 2018, 2019 got, I think it was 13 million rand from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And that was to actually clear the backlog of drugs which hadn't been passed for use in South Africa. And they used one of their mates who's tied up with the World Economic Forum to do that. But the conflict of interest there is quite extraordinary. Now, look, we're getting off the point. Let's get back to money laundering.
But it's a good point that it's good that we discuss it, but I think there's one thing that we have left out with the uptake here, and the problem with the uptake here is that South Africans are really ill-disciplined. They don't always do what they're told to do and what they're supposed to do. So I think there's a little bit of that was involved in not being able to push the drug. People were just saying, like, we're not going to take this thing, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, I think they made a very wise decision, personally. But that I'm just saying. Now,
I'm unvaxxed. I wasn't going to take it. I'm not going to take anything that hasn't been tested. Period.
Well,
at all. I was amazed when this drug came out. I thought,
how stupid!
This doesn't make sense at all. I'm like, I'm not taking this.
Yeah.
I want to see what happens first. Somebody dropped down dead. I'd rather get sick and die like that and just there's it. Now it's happened, but not actually purposefully put something in my body that I know nothing about. Nope, ain't gonna happen.
Well,
anyway, let's move.
I can tell you, Bart, that this video will not last 5 minutes on YouTube after what we've just been talking about. So I will just keep store it on.
There you go. We're having a good time, so that's fine.
that's good. But we'll keep it on Loving Life TV, where we have our own platform. Now let's get back to money laundering, because seriously, when you think about what we've just been talking about, it is almost like money laundering, what they do with this huge amount of money. But what is the cost to the global economy of implementing the FATF recommendations? I know you said something like 0.5% of GDP or whatever.
Well, it's 800 billion to 2 trillion.
So
US dollars. That's the cost of implementation globally.
How is that money spent? I mean, why does it cost so much money?
Well, you've heard of RICA.
Yes.
And you've heard of FICA.
Yes.
Well, that's where it starts. What do you think that costs a bank? That RICA and FICA adds layers of administration.
Ah, right. Okay.
Data.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea how much data, financial data, needs to be stored and kept for a determined period of time. That's got to be housed where? It's an enormous cost. The thing is, when I say that's what it costs globally, it in fact costs you. Because don't think your bank is absorbing the cost. Don't think your government is absorbing the cost. You are. If you have a financial intelligence center, which is part of the whole FATF process, our financial intelligence center is there to implement the recommendations of the FATF, and it's like a regulatory body, so or statutory body or whatever. And who pays them? The government, the taxpayer pays them. So the whole structure really is paid for by the man in the street, I guess.
Yeah. Well,
for a system, I think that I must be perfectly honest. I think that the FATF, this anti-money laundering regimen that we have right now, in terms of its efficacy, is probably one of the biggest hoaxes. If financial crimes, not crime, but crime, whatever, but it's almost on the par with the vaccines. I mean, this is crazy. You can't spend trillions of dollars and recover 5 billion, over a period of 4 years. I mean, and the interesting thing about it is how it really works is that you've got like a country like the United States, you have a threshold for reporting. So if you do any business, I think at the time when I was still lecturing, it was like $10,000 in cash. It had to be, you have to generate a suspicious transaction report at the bank, and then you send that to your financial intelligence center. So there is a threshold, otherwise you're going to get trillions of transactions. So to try and manage how many transactions and suspicious transactions reports get generated in an economy and through banks on a daily basis. So they set a threshold, a minimum threshold. So South Africa was like 10,000 rand. And the interesting thing about it was that the guys that were involved in the attack on the World Trade Center, because the FATF was there already. So the United States had their anti-money laundering regimen. It was there. It had been there for 10 years. All of the you want to call them terrorists that were involved in the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon and the rest used the formal banking system.
Yeah.
You would have thought that they were using these informal systems like the Hawala or something like that, but no. They actually used the formal banking system. They just kept all their transactions below the threshold for review by the banks.
Yeah.
So they actually brought their money in legally.
Well, I want to tell you something that happened to me personally here in Australia back in 2009. I went to Westpac where I had a bank account, and I had a fair amount of cash in there, and I withdrew $11,000 in cash just because I wanted to, because it was my money. Yeah. And a week later, there's a knock on my front door, and there are these two suits outside, two very formal-looking guys, and they said, "Look, we need to have a chat with you." So I invited them in, and they were from some obscure government department interrogating me about the $11,000 I'd drawn in cash from the bank, and suggesting that I might be involved in money laundering. Now, look, I mean, I find that quite extraordinary, and I always say to people, now, if you're going to draw money from a bank, what you do is you draw 5,000 Rand or $5,000 today, then you wait a few days and you draw another 5,000, and that way you fly under the radar. But if you draw 20,000, they're going to be knocking on your door asking questions. And the big fruit like Ramaphosa and basically the entire ANC ministry, who are involved in corruption and fraud, and they're just a bunch of mafia, they never ever get investigated for anything. So why do they target the little guy and leave the big guy alone?
Well, this is almost getting a little bit closer to the bone for me. We're talking about, look at China, and you walk through the streets, you've got all these cameras, and they take pictures of your face and facial recognition, and you've got to go everywhere, you've got to tap cards, or whatever, digital IDs and whatever. Surveillance.
Central bank digital currency, which means that everything you do will be surveilled.
Bingo. And what we have, you could almost liken the current anti-money laundering processes as almost being like it's global surveillance of people's finances. It's global surveillance. That's what it is. That's all it is. But almost like in an analog form, and once you get to the digital currencies, well, then it just goes digital, and it becomes a lot more seamless. But the thing is, I mean, you watch the gold mafia program by Al Jazeera, I'm sure, right?
Yes, I did. I mean,
you've got billions flowing through the banks. How does this happen? How you've got companies that have got auditors, and some of the companies they've got lawyers. They're run by lawyers, and you've got your auditors, and you've got these major banks. I mean, you've got the Guptas. How on earth did they get billions? Not you and me, your $11,000 lacquer out the country. We're talking about billions. Now they're out the country. We can't get them back, and they've got the money, and we don't even know where the money is. How did that happen? Now, you would assume that if it's R1 billion or $1 billion, the bank's going to be jumping up and down. The bank, if the money did pass through the bank, they didn't do their customer due diligence. They didn't do their KYC. Did they? Didn't they? Did they query the transactions? What explanations did they get? You would think that the bank would have been charged by the authorities. The authorities would be kicking down their doors by now because the bank would be complicit, but they're not. So it gets to the point of why is only $5 billion in fact confiscated at the end of the day, and yet we've got figures like trillions on an annual basis that is being laundered, and it's costing 800 billion to $1 trillion to implement it. So we are throwing billions and billions and billions and trillions of dollars at a problem that is giving us a return of 5 billion over a period of 4 years. What does it tell you?
Now look,
what does it tell you? So at the end of the day, it's only you, me, the guy next door, your mom, your wife, your kids. They're the ones that are being surveilled. Nobody else.
Yeah. Well,
period.
What I found,
and that's a problem for me, which is why I just find it quite unpalatable to lecture on the subject. Yeah.
Well, what I found really disturbing in that video that we're talking about is a reference to a bank I'd never heard of before called SASFIN, SASFIN Bank. In South Africa.
We know SASFIN. Yeah, we know SASFIN. Yeah, it's a brand name. It's not like an obscure bank that nobody knows about. But we do. And they're heavy in vehicle financing and that type of thing. So yeah.
They were the ones that were used largely for the money laundering in South Africa. One person who had direct contacts at the Reserve Bank, and they basically rubber stamped anything and everything that was put their way, because apparently they got paid in cash, the equivalent of their salary, just to facilitate this.
Which is peanuts.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's
if you look at the risks they're taking.
Yeah.
And if you look at the scope of the money laundering operation that was involved, I mean, they were getting nothing. What are you talking about? 20,000 rand? What's the salary? 30,000 rand? 20,000 rand a month? And then after all your deductions and the rest of it, so you're taking home 20,000 extra. What's 20,000 rand in Australian dollars? $1,000 a month?
It's who does that? It's about $1,500. It's peanuts.
Yeah. But the consequence is you're actually facilitating the laundering of billions of rands from illicit tobacco, of all things, that should be taxed to begin with.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the whole chain of revenue that the fiscus loses, not only the money that is leaving the country, but all the customs, the excise, all the taxes that should have been levied against the products that are involved, That's also lost to the economy. So it's billions and billions that ultimately is impacted by their activity for 20,000 a month. So some people come cheap.
Yeah. Well, let's face it, money laundering is probably the biggest white-collar crime in the world today when you think of the amount of money involved. So why was South Africa recently greylisted? Because it clearly this happens all over the world.
I think one of the main reasons, well, everybody knows that there's fraud and there's corruption in the country, and everybody knows about the Guptas. Everybody knows that the Guptas got out and they took money out, and there've been no arrests, there've been no consequences. So South Africa is busy doing this little tick box exercise, which the FATF has wisened up to and said, no, it's not a tick box exercise. You've got to have an MPA that is able to prosecute these crimes. You've got to have police that are able to investigate these crimes. These two bodies must be independent. They must show no fear, no favor. You need to once a case is reported, you need to act on it. That's part of it. But then you have programs like Al Jazeera that comes out that shows the sheer scope of the money laundering and identifies people in South Africa. And what have you heard since?
Nothing.
The Zimbabweans have come out and said, they're going to prosecute this guy, you're going to prosecute that guy. Have you heard anything else since then? Nothing. Well, you see, that is a problem. That gets to the core of the problem. And that is we are paying lip service to money laundering. And the international community and the FATF are not very happy about that. But not only that, we have other problems. We have an extremely porous border. We have an influx of foreigners. And the first thing people are going to say, "Oh, you being what is it? Xenophobic." Look here, 2010. There were numerous cases that were identified in the company's intellectual it's the CIPRO company's intellectual property registration office. They were experiencing a lot of problems with companies being registered hand over fist. I mean, one auditor had 145,000 companies registered.
Jeez.
So we had to, it was a group of 3 of them, as a matter of fact. So these companies had to be investigated. Are they legitimate companies? Are they fraudulent companies, etc., etc.? And the first thing you have to do with a company that's registered, it's like the birth of a baby almost. Like your registrar of companies is like where a company gets born. So you have to have a mommy and you have to have a daddy, and the mommy and daddy must have an ID too. You know what I mean? So you investigate the company, you see who the mommy and daddy is, and that's the directors, and you get their IDs and their details, and then you have to go to Home Affairs, and then you cross-reference there to see if these are legitimate citizens. Once we got, the investigators that went over that side got to Home Affairs, they were confused because there were like 90 million people on the database. That was 2010.
Wow.
So I mean, our census at that stage, I think we had 54 million population. So how do you have 90 million people in the database, which told us that the database is extremely dirty? But that also sparked off some investigations into the use of illegal identity documents, and there were numerous investigations in Joburg Park, at the foot of Hillbrow, and areas around Park Station, etc., where you have all these corner shops, cafes we call them, or whatever. The corner cafe. Yeah. Sells fish chips and the rest of that kind of thing, and these shops were selling ID books for 1,500, 2,000. The most expensive identity document, South African ID, that we found then was 3,000 rand. And that was those things were being produced at those shops, and they were being sold across the counter. But over the years, you now get these IDs that you cannot tell whether they're legitimate or not. Home Affairs can't tell whether they're legitimate or not. So the last time the Home Affairs Minister was in Parliament and gave statistics on illegal aliens in our country, I think he put it at 15 million. Now forget about the dirty data. that's sitting at Home Affairs, and how do they clean that up and decide who's a legitimate South African, who's not? Because that's a monumental task on its own. But the Home Affairs Minister tells the Portfolio Committee in Parliament that we've got 15 million illegals in our country. So if you happen to get an illegal identity document, there's virtually no policing, and you can now go and open a company. So if you have 1 million people that are here illegally, all opening up a company, do you see the problem when it comes to organized crime, money laundering?
Yeah.
And the ability to then take that, register the company, and then open up a bank account.
Yeah, there's no checks and balances.
Exactly. And then you can open up 10 or 20 companies, and now you start perpetrating VAT fraud. You put input VAT, output, and the problem just grows and grows and grows. So we're sitting in a situation now where it's almost virtually untenable. To combat money laundering is almost impossible. Getting us off that grey list is going to be, I don't think we're going to be able to do it. I really don't, because I don't know what the solution is. The solution is leadership, government, and a really, really tough stance on the illegal immigrants in the country. And we're not going to get it.
Well, just on that grey listing, apparently with the grey listing, a country is given a certain set period of time to fix the issue. And if it doesn't fix the issue, then it gets blacklisted. What you're saying, in effect, is that South Africa is heading financially to be blacklisted around the world.
Yeah, if the FATF is happy with the tick box exercise, fine. And I don't see why they shouldn't be, because I mean that's how it's been working up until now. But if you really want to look at the fundamental problem, the egg is broken. The egg is broken. So you can have your tick box exercise, and while you're doing that, you're looking at the floor and you're saying, but how do you unscramble this egg? We can comply with the rules. We can introduce whatever legislation and regulation you want. Fine. But how do you stop a guy walking across the border with boxes and boxes of illicit cigarettes on his back? How are you going to do that?
You know what? What it reminds me of, Bart, is that old nursery rhyme. Humpty Dumpty had a big fall. Humpty Dumpty, da 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 da, and all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. I mean, that's really what we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, I just don't think. I really don't think that. I don't think that the public grasp just how big the problem is.
So what we're actually saying, Bart, is that money laundering in South Africa makes state capture look like a sideshow.
Oh, big time. Oh, of course. Of course.
Wow. Okay. So
the state capture's chump change was money laundering. I can tell you that now.
Yeah.
No doubt about that. Yeah. No, it's big money.
Now you mentioned,
and fraud and corruption that goes with it. I mean, especially with legal companies and. Yeah.
Now we're talking about registered companies. What are the implications of CIPC registered companies being used to commit a transnational economic crime?
Well, what are the consequences in what respect?
Well, like money laundering and things like that.
Well, who are you going to call? Who are you going to charge? Well, who are you going to call? Ghostbusters. so it's a legal registered entity with but all the underlying documents are fake. Well, they're not fake because they've actually been issued by some corrupt official inside. Well, they are fake, but they're actually genuine. They look genuine. They are genuine, except they're fake. I mean, so these documents are used to register these companies. What are you going to do now?
Something that's always.
Who are you going to chase? Because the person you're chasing is not the person in the ID; it's somebody else with another ID.
Something that's always really just makes no sense to me is that if you've got a let's say a director of a company who embezzles, let's say $5 million from that company, It's called a white collar crime, and he might get a slap on the wrist and 3 months behind bars. But if Mary in Global goes into the local spaza shop and steals a loaf of bread, she can go behind bars for 6 months. And it seems to be a complete disconnect between, white collar crime involving huge amounts of money and some little petty theft. What is going on there?
I must give you an anecdote. I was lecturing, Kenya's going to hate me for this. I was lecturing the Kenyan Central Bank, I think it's about 10 years ago now. And a number of other companies in Kenya. And during one of the lectures that occurred, we were talking about different regulations and legislation, different jurisdictions, etc. And we're talking about Kenya, and Kenya's talking about their law. And they had theft, but they didn't have like fraud. The fraud was defined as, or the crime of theft was theft by servant. It's defined as theft by servant. It's colonial law.
Right.
What it basically means, though, and fraud, which is a felony. So theft. Oh yes, that's it. Okay, theft in Kenya is defined as theft by servant, not theft by servant, and it is a felony. But fraud on the statute books at the time was a misdemeanor. So if you were working for the boss, or the boss, and you used to call it the boss of the madam those days in Kenya, and you were caught stealing a silver spoon, you went to jail. But if you were the boss, the owner of the plantation, and you stole $1 million, you got a parking ticket.
Yeah.
It was actually in their laws. So that goes to literally, this goes to what you're saying, is that you have this inequality in terms of the little guy that steals like 50,000 or 10,000 or 20,000, he's going to go to jail, for whatever. The guy that steals the big bucks very seldom sees the inside of a jail. But there have been, in the United States, have had a few. So.
Yeah, but when we talk about the United States, I look at the circus when it comes to how the establishment is targeting Donald Trump. He's been taken to court for just about waking up in the morning. The things they're trying to charge him for, some of them are absolutely ridiculous. And it's clearly political, and it's clearly tied up with the politics in America. And yet Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, somehow they are just above the law. They can do what they like. They can launder money. They can get involved in pedophilia. They can do the drug story. They can do whatever they like, and they get a clear pass. And of course, the fake mainstream media don't touch it with a barge pole. So the inequality that takes place at so many levels around the world is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, different standards, different standards for different people. The Tucker Carlson, I've watched the guy. He makes me laugh. I think he's very, very good.
Yeah.
And but I'm not supposed to say that because he's right wing. And I saw, I think yesterday, the day before yesterday, that on CNN, what do they call him? Ultra right wing. I'm like,
hey, mate,
wow.
You know what?
Look, I went to sleep. I woke up, and I'm now the Bruderpunkt or something.
Bart, I got to tell you, I wear that label with pride. I'm pleased to be labelled ultra right wing because you know what it means? It means you're a critical thinker. You can think for yourself, and you don't listen to the BS that comes out of these mainstream media organizations.
Yeah, I think what happened over the years somewhere is almost like the magnetic poles. They like flip. I think the left has become the right, and the right's become the left. Because the people that are thinking are mostly centre right, the left. I don't know.
I can tell you what the problem is.
Me and like we're confused.
I can tell you what the confusion and the problem is because if you look at America, for example, the Republicans and the Democrats, they're all controlled by the same people. So it doesn't make a difference which party you vote in. You still got the same people in the back rooms controlling everything. So it's all a game. That's politics is just a game. Now
I find it difficult talking about America at this stage of the game because I think the country is totally mashugana. It's crazy. It's nuts. It's a Fruit Loop.
America's going down. America's going down. Have you seen the streets of Philadelphia?
You mean the dirt?
No, I mean the people on fentanyl, the drug addicts. Yes, I mean, they're like zombies. You walk through Philadelphia now, and it's like walking through zombie town. I
like the new shopping. I like the new cardless shopping that they've got going on.
Yeah, it's like shopping in South Africa, isn't it? I mean, in Portland, all the Walmarts have shut down because so much has just been blatantly stolen from the shops.
Crazy, just crazy. No law and order.
No law and order.
Come into a country near you.
Now look, we've been going on off topic, but that's fine because it's quite fun. Now, okay, so you made the statement that money laundering makes state capture look like a sideshow, and I can understand what you're saying. Now, I heard about a year ago that what the ANC elite, the politicians, were doing was they had some company in Johannesburg that was actually laundering all their money over to Dubai. So all these guys were getting their money out of South Africa, the ill-gotten gains, and putting them into Dubai. And I'm talking about people like Ramaphosa. I'm talking about people like David Mabuza. I'm talking about the whole lot. They're basically getting their money out of the country as if they're expecting things to collapse here in South Africa. How does one actually stop them doing that? Because clearly there's a lot of money that politically is moving out of South Africa so that they can feather their nest in a safe country once they've screwed South Africa. How can that be stopped?
Well, you need an NPA. You need political will. You need the transactions to be flagged. How are they moving it out? Is it through the formal banking system? Is it through the informal banking system? Somebody, asked me to help them the other day. Well, I don't know if Anyway, this is a journalist, and one of the propositions we were talking, because of this gold mafia, and they were talking about the hawala, and I'm looking at this hawala and saying, but no, hawala is great. But for this type of operation, it's big, and you're talking about a lot of cash, and moving cash like that is always vulnerable. I suppose so is gold, in that type of commodity. But there you go. But you need banking regulation. You need regulators. You need your investigators. You need the police. You need oversight, and there's none. If there isn't any, then what? And if you're controlling the police, if you're controlling the Reserve Bank, you're getting authority from somebody inside the Reserve Bank, you've got somebody in the bank that works for you, then what have you got to worry about? Tell me something. How much money do you think? How much money has South Africa lost to corruption internally? Forget about the Guptas.
Oh, look, it would be trillions of rands.
It is trillions. It is probably in the trillions already. It is probably in the trillions. Well, where's that money? Somebody posted a picture of a vendor the other day, and we're having a chat, and we're going like, it seems like, the first province that had a chance to eat was the Eastern Cape, Thabo Mbeki's hometown. When he was president, the place was swinging. And then Zuma came in, and you go to KwaZulu-Natal, to Durban, and they're building highways, they're building this, they're building that, and they're all in their sort of farm areas and that type of thing. All these mansions popping up all over the place, and then there was just a massive boom, and Durban's gone down, and KwaZulu-Natal's gone down because Zuma's not president. Now go out to Northwest, go out to Limpopo, go out to Bavenda. You see how that place is pumping, pal, because you've got a president from there. So you've got this tribe, that tribe, that tribe. Each one gets a chance, and then their area will get this massive economic boost. Now you've got all of these mansions. I'm looking at these videos and I'm going, where did these things come from? I mean, if I see 100 multi-million rand mansions in a few square kilometers all together, there they are. I want to see an industrial park somewhere. I want to see massive industry. I want to see something being produced. We've got nothing. We don't have an economy. Go out to where my brother is on the East Rand. I mean, that is the manufacturing hub of South Africa.
Yeah.
The factories are dead. They're all closed.
Yeah.
So where's this money coming from? You're telling me that the investigators, regulators, who's moving that money for them? No, any of them being flagged at the bank? The banks are making money. Come on. It's not in their interest, really. All they do is they just generate they tick the boxes, they generate as many suspicious transaction reports as possible, and then it all ends up at the Financial Intelligence Center. They're totally overwhelmed. They don't have enough people to go through all of these investigations, and things just fall through the crack and never get followed up on. And there's no appetite. You go and you investigate somebody for laundering money, and you wake up dead. You get shot.
Yeah.
You don't whistleblow here. You can't do your job. Are you kidding me? So there's a serious breakdown in law and order and in our prosecution capability and capacity. So yeah, this gives rise to the levels of money laundering, drug trafficking, weapons, gold, cigarettes, everything that's illegal. You got it. We have a crime crisis, which is giving rise to a money laundering crisis.
Yeah, well, the only growth industry apart from potholes in South Africa is crime.
That is the biggest industry, I'm sure. It must be by now.
Yeah.
No, not quite. But I mean, it's literally it is really, really serious, and it all comes back down to the question of how do we get off the grey list?
Yeah.
And I'm probably from this show I'm going to take some flack, but I really couldn't care. The reason actually why I'm on your show and I'm actually talking about the stuff which I wouldn't have done before is because I'm at that age and stage of my life where I don't care.
Yeah. Well, it's
good on you for talking out. I'm not going to get that job, or that banker's going to blackball me and not hire me to come and lecture their staff, and that one's not going to give me a forensic audit. And then I just, you know what? Listen, this is the situation. Take it or leave it, and that's it. If you can argue my facts, come on, and we'll dance. But at the end of the day, I know I'm right. And as a matter of fact, most of the people, your Chad Thomases of the world and quite a few others know that I'm right, that we are sitting with a catastrophic problem. We're heading towards a failed state, and we don't know how to stop it.
Yeah. Now, look, I'm going to wrap up this live stream shortly, Bart, but before I do...
I was waffling a bit.
No, that's okay. But before we do, I've got a question here from one of the listeners, and guys, if you've got questions, put them in the side chat now, because we're going to wrap up very shortly. Petrusa said, perhaps Bart can be asked how we could go under the radar to escape the surveillance. How does he himself live to escape it, apart from smashing our phones and cancel internet and Wi-Fi, etc.?
Well, come to South Africa and buy an ID document.
Okay, so you have multiple personalities or multiple identities.
Look, the little guys, it's as you say, you go and you draw your $11,000 and somebody comes and knocks on your door. It's happened to me. I mean, I came back from Kenya and I had to and somebody overpaid me. So I just wanted to send the guy's money back. And after about a month, I just quit. And the guy was livid with me. I just couldn't tell the guys. I just want to send the guy's money back. It was impossible. So how to do it under the radar. I mean, this is certainly not the platform for me to be giving out lessons on how to launder money.
Well, apparently the easiest way to
What's
do
Al
it,
Jazeera?
apparently the easiest way to do it is to have fake invoices. You send over an invoice to someone else from another country, and they pay that invoice, and the money is basically just being laundered.
Yeah. It's just basically at the end of the day, it's a payable against a receivable, which is how the Wala system works. So you come and give some money to a guy here, $1 million, and then he gives you a number, and he phones a guy, whichever country you want the money to be paid out. You phone your guy who's the recipient, that's not give him this number, and he goes to the other guy, and the other guy gives him $1 million, and there's no transaction. Nothing on the radar. And that's the Hawala system. So there are numerous systems like that, but I mean, I don't want to get into too much detail when it comes to that. But I mean, that's how it's done, really.
Yeah. Look, there's so many holes. It's like having a chicken wire fence around your bed to keep the mosquitoes out, because it's just.
Because I think the whole idea is to make it more difficult for people to launder money. But I mean, as I pointed out to you, we've got billions stolen in this country, and it's not even hidden. I mean, you just drive down the road, and there it is in front of you. Even if the guy pays taxes, it's like, where's the money come from?
Yeah.
There's no due process.
Yeah. Exactly.
There's due diligence for you and me, but there's no due process when it comes to the fraudster and the money launderer.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work. It's just not working. It's not working globally. So at all, and they know that. I actually did it. Have you used ChatGPT?
Yes, I have. I did ChatGPT. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was throwing money laundering questions at ChatGPT as an exercise, and it's spat out all of these. It actually threw out a lot of these statistics I'm actually giving you, because this stuff is hidden. It takes you forever to search it on the internet, just cold searching. But I was fascinated by the results I was getting out, because it was giving me all in amongst all the verbiage that it was spitting out, which is pure propaganda, I must tell you. ChatGPT is quite dangerous. I mean, if you're going to write a thesis for your university degree on money laundering, hey, go for it. ChatGPT is the place. It's going to give you all the stock answers, and then it'll give you the factual answer, and then it'll justify why the figures are so low by saying, so it's like it costs this, but it does that, and it's a good thing. So it actually sells its answer. So you've got to be doing this job for a very long time to realize that all of that guff, you've got to strip it away. So I actually went on an exercise to trick it by asking the same questions, but just different permutations, until it literally got to the point where it says, okay, fine.
Well, look,
there's a problem. We can't justify the expense. I was like, okay, I asked it the question and said, listen, okay, here's trillion. Yeah, I'm going to invest $1 trillion in that economy, and it's going to give me 5 billion rand return on my investment. Is that a good return on the investment? He said, no. I said, thank you. Bye.
Yeah. Look, it's again just a form of surveillance and control of the little guy. That's what it is.
It is it's massive surveillance on a scale. But again, it's analog at this stage of the game. In relative terms to where we are with technology now. Once we start getting to these digital currencies, I mean, it's game over.
Yeah.
Game over.
Central bank digital currencies. Yeah, then we're completely effed. But just
you hit a switch. You just hit a switch and you're gone.
Yeah,
you're gone. Yeah, that's the problem.
With ChatGPT, that's artificial intelligence, and I am absolutely 100% sure now that when the Antichrist comes, he will be basically part of artificial intelligence, because it'll control everything that happens in our lives, everything we do, and that's where he will hang out. All right. Now, on that very somber note, Bart, is there a message you'd like to give people before we wrap this live stream up?
Oh, not really. Just thanks for watching, and Scott, thank you for inviting me. And yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, we've covered a lot of ground.
Maybe we'll do another one. We'll look at something else.
Yeah, we'll have to do another one on that other subject we were talking about.
100%.
All right.
100%. But
yeah,
folks, thanks for watching. Scott, thanks for inviting me, mate, and have a good day.
Yeah, you too, buddy. And
Cheers,
yeah, bye for now. All right, guys, that was Bart Henderson, and we were talking about money laundering and with a focus on South Africa. And I hope you found that of interest. I mean, it just gives you some focus and some idea on how huge the criminality involved in money laundering is. And of course, it's what they call a white-collar crime. So the actual penalties are often totally out of whack compared to us little mere mortals who might do something wrong, like get a speeding fine or whatever. You know, it's a crazy world we live in. All right, now our next live stream is going to be on Monday, and I do want to draw your attention once again to the live stream on Wednesday night, the 17th of May, where I'm going to be talking to a truly remarkable man. And he had a huge role to play in what happened in 1994. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap that up, and let's go out with Op ons rots, and have a great weekend. Bye for now.
Ons loop hand aan hand op goue warm sand, so baie wat ek wil hee, so baie dit brand. Ek staan op my rots met golwe wat bots. Ons het geen vrees, want hy is in beheer. Ons sien al die planne van goddeloze mannen. Ons weet hulle gaan nie wen nie. Dis die strijd, soos in tyd. Ons sal wen, aanhou, want hy is in beheer. Die winde was sterk, dis krachte wat werk. Die gevoel in my hart, dis vrees wat wil brand. Ons woede met trots, met my hand in my bors. Ons geen vrees, want hy is in beheer. Ons sien al die planne van goddeloze mannen. Ons weet hulle gaan nie wen nie. Dis die strijd, soos in tyd. Ons sal wen, aanhou, want hy is in beheer. Ons sien wat gebeur, die leer sal ons nie steen. Kom staan nog een keer, ek is stil, want ek weet, hy is in beheer. Ons sien al die planne van goddeloze mannen. Ons weet hulle gaan nie wen nie. Dis die strijd, soos in tyd.